All right. I think we will go ahead and get started with the presentation. So I'm going to start out just by sharing my screen here. Let me get this in presentation mode. Okay. All right. Are you able to see my screen, Natalie? Is it up there? Okay, perfect. Awesome. So yeah, welcome everybody. This is a webinar titled Dyslexia and Avoiding the Summer Slump. Welcome. We're so glad to have you here. Thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us here for the webinar tonight. We really appreciate it, and we're really excited to have a chance to talk about this topic. We're really passionate about dyslexia and dyslexia awareness, and really enjoy the opportunity that these webinars give us to be able to answer questions and talk about issues related to dyslexia. My name is Peter Groth. I'm the founder and CEO of Dyslexia Connect Online Tutoring, which I started in 2010. I was trained in the Orton Gillingham method in 2004. The Orton Gillingham method is a very well-known method for helping kids and adults with dyslexia learn to improve their reading and spelling abilities. And I worked as a dyslexia tutor for many years and then started Dyslexia Connect in 2010 and actually worked with a lot of our students early on after starting the company as well. So in total, I have about 22 years of experience working with students who have dyslexia. A little bit more about Dyslexia Connect. We provide online dyslexia tutoring to families and to school districts. And if you're interested in more information, you can visit us at dyslexiaconnect.com. We actually provide a free trial with no obligation to anyone who would like to check out our online tutoring. We offer online Orton Gillingham dyslexia tutoring. So if you're interested in that, you can sign up for one of those on the website. It's really nice. It provides an online tutoring session so that you can get a little bit of experience and see what our online tutoring sessions are like. And we also provide a free report at the end of the session, which gives you really good insight into the struggles that a student is having with reading and spelling and strategies that will be able to help them improve in those areas. So we'd be happy to have you check us out if you'd like to visit our website. I thought I'd go over the objectives for today. I'm going to start by talking about what the summer slump is, and then how it affects students with dyslexia, how a summer learning routine can help to avoid the summer slump, strategies and materials to use with your student, and then we will have a question and answer session. The presentation itself will probably last about 20 to 30 minutes, and then we're also going to have question and answer session that will be about 20 to 30 minutes. And I'm very pleased to be joined by Natalie from the Dyslexia Connect admin staff today. Natalie is a former teacher and dyslexia tutor with a wealth of education and experience working with students who have dyslexia, and I'm really happy to have her here today. She's going to be helping to answer your questions during the webinar. If you have a question, you can submit that at any time during my presentation or afterwards during the question and answer session. And to do that, we'd like to ask that you use the Zoom chat and select the Everyone tab. If you use the Everyone tab, everybody will be able to see your question and the answer. So I'll be able to see it, Natalie will be able to, and our other attendees will also be able to see that, which is really helpful because we often have attendees who have similar questions or sometimes the same question. And when you use that Everyone tab, um, everybody will be able to see your response, and it's possible they have the same question and will be able to get their question answered that way. As I mentioned, you can submit a question at any time using the chat during my presentation or after during the question and answer session. Natalie will be answering some questions via the chat box, and then we'll also be taking some questions to answer out loud during that Q&A session. If you wouldn't mind, it'd be very helpful for us if you can include your role when you submit a question. So, for example, if you are a teacher who works with students who have dyslexia, if you can mention that when you submit your question, or if you're a parent who has a child with dyslexia, if you wouldn't mind mentioning that when you submit your question, that additional information really helps us to hopefully give you the most focused response possible and the most relevant information. So it's helpful for us when we're trying to formulate an answer and give you information that's hopefully the most relevant to you. One of the great things about doing these webinars is that we get together a lot of people who have a great amount of knowledge and experience about the topic, about dyslexia. And attendees are often able to provide great answers to questions as well, which is one of the reasons I like doing these webinars, is we all can all get together and about a topic related to dyslexia and learn from each other, which is really great and something that I enjoy a lot. We are offering a professional development certificate if you are interested in getting a professional development hour from the webinar tonight. If you are a teacher or paraprofessional, this is available to anyone who attends the full live webinar tonight. If you would like to request a professional development certificate, we'd like to ask that you go to our website, which is dyslexiaconnect.com, to request a certificate. Once you're on the website, you can click on any of the buttons that say free trial, because those all pull up our contact forms to send us a message and request that. Or you can also click on the contact page that has a contact form on it as well that you can use. Unfortunately, we are not able to provide a certificate in response to requests in the chat during the webinar. So if you would like a certificate, please go to our website and request it that way. Okay, well, let's start out by talking about what is the summer slump. The summer slump, or summer slide as it's sometimes called, is a decline in academic skills over summer vacation due to lack of use and instruction. How does it affect students with dyslexia? Well, the summer slump can affect a variety of academic skills. For a student with dyslexia, we are specifically concerned about the possible decline in reading, spelling, and reading comprehension skills that can happen in the summer as an effect of that summer slump. Why are reading and spelling affected? Well, these areas are often affected because many students are not receiving reading and spelling instruction during the summer. Um, so there's a break where they may not be receiving instruction for 2 months or 3 months or a bit more than that. Also, when students are not receiving instruction in reading and spelling, bad reading habits may reemerge. To give you an example of that, one of the things that we work on a lot with our students to help them improve is trying to get rid of the habit of guessing at words. A lot of times, students who have reading difficulties will fall into the habit of guessing at words because they're not comfortable decoding them or reading them. And this leads to a bad habit of pretty continual guessing when they are reading. This has a really negative effect on reading accuracy. And since it affects reading accuracy, it also affects reading comprehension in a really negative way. So that's something that we work really hard on, helping students to break that habit. But sometimes if students are still in the process of getting their reading up to speed and they don't have current instruction, they may fall back into bad habits like that, like guessing at words, for example. Another issue is the student may avoid reading during the summer. For a lot of students with dyslexia, reading can feel really exhausting and sometimes very frustrating. And as a result, if there isn't a schedule or really a requirement for them to do reading during the summer, they may avoid reading entirely. And when that happens, those skills often decline. And as you can imagine, it can result in a student not reading at all if they're avoiding reading for possibly 2 months or 3 months during the summer. And if that happens, we can see a big decline in reading skills that are evident once they restart school in August or September. So some reasons why the effect may be dramatic for students with dyslexia. Effective instruction for a student with dyslexia is very much a building block process. So you start with the fundamentals. Once the student has mastered those things, you go on to the next thing. They mastered that, you go on to the next thing. A summer break tends to interrupt that building block process. So a student may be making progress with a certain concept and doing pretty well. Give you a random example, maybe they're learning the different sounds of or they're learning, I should say, how to use the OA vowel combination, and they're doing pretty well getting familiar with it, but then they have a break of 2 or 3 months. They go back to getting instructions in the fall, and suddenly they really don't know that OA vowel combination at all anymore. And their teacher or tutor has to sort of go back and do a lot of review or start from square one in teaching that again. Also, progress for a student with dyslexia typically requires lots of repetition. The methods that are very effective for teaching students with dyslexia have a lot of repetition built in because that's really necessary. And so since that repetition is so important, that break of 2 or 3 months from that, if the student is not receiving instruction over the summer, can cause some negative outcomes. One of the things that can really help to avoid the summer slump is a summer learning routine. And this is something that you can develop with a student, and it can be really a positive thing that can help over the summer. There are a lot of benefits to a summer learning routine. Summer is full of activities, of course. There are all kinds of sports going on. Sometimes there are trips that families are taking, lots of different special events and activities, and family reunions, and all kinds of good stuff like that. As a result, it can be difficult to fit in learning activities if they aren't planned. And a learning routine really helps learning to be consistent during the summer. One of the benefits is that kids with dyslexia often love routine. It really helps them to feel reassured. They like knowing what's coming up and what to expect. And in fact, something that a lot of our tutors do with students is that they will actually discuss the lesson plan for the day at the beginning of a session, because a lot of students like that, to know that, well, we're going to work on flashcards, then we're going to spell words using those sounds, then we'll be playing a phonics game, then we'll be doing reading. And they like to know what to plan on. And additionally, if you do have a plan and a routine, it really helps them to be more open to summer learning if they realize that, hey, this is what we do every week. On Thursdays, we do this. On Fridays, we do that. And you probably get less pushback from them about it as a result. So, here are some strategies and materials that you can use with a student over the summer in that summer learning routine. You can have your child or student read aloud to you. This is a simple but extremely beneficial exercise. It's really, really helpful. And in fact, when the parents in our program ask about something they can do with their child at home to help their child reinforce what they're learning and also to help them make progress, this is often the first thing that we suggest to them. It's very simple to do, but very, very beneficial. And it can have great benefits even if you do it for just a little bit each day, or, 3, 4 days of the week. It can be very beneficial. And here are some tips for effective reading aloud practice. One thing is to do it as consistently as possible. As I was mentioning, students are often much more open to something if they're used to it and doing it consistently. So if you normally do reading on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, for example, they're going to expect that and probably push back less when you say, like, hey, it's time to do our reading. Let's do that. When you're having them read out loud, have them go back and correct when they make an error and remind them to apply their skills that they know. So this is very beneficial because reading accuracy issues are a very common sign and symptom of dyslexia. And so we want to have them go back and correct what they are reading. For example, if they misread a word, have them go back to that, ask them to use their knowledge to sound the word out. And then once that's corrected, they can go ahead and read the whole sentence again. We really like to shoot for 100% reading accuracy, and that doesn't mean that they are reading with 100% accuracy from the beginning to end of the passage. It just means that when they're making mistakes, like the one I mentioned, we're going back and having them correct that. And that is really, really effective in helping them to get out of bad habits. And it is one of the main ways that we can help them build reading accuracy and improve that. And reading accuracy helps in all areas. One of the things that helps them the most is reading comprehension, of course. You can also help them with punctuation and inflection. This is something that a lot of students with dyslexia struggle with. You might notice when they're reading aloud that they go straight through periods, don't stop at all, or go straight through commas. And practicing that punctuation will help them get much more of a feel for reading and also make it more fun for them. And I wanted to mention that that one great way to do this actually, especially with periods and commas, because those can be problematic for kids with dyslexia. A great way to practice those is to have the student take a breath when they come to one of those. That's a really good physical reminder that, oh yeah, there's a comma there. Take a breath. I need to pause here for a second before I go on so that they don't just go straight through that punctuation. And the same with periods as well. Once they get used to doing that physical thing when they see a period or comma, it can be a really good reminder for them. And also, you can help them with inflection. Sometimes students with dyslexia read in a very monotone voice because they're spending a lot of time and mental effort just to sound those words out and to be able to read them. And they might not be focusing much on how they're reading or the inflection that they're using. And that's something that you can work on with them while they are reading out loud. Another thing you can do during reading aloud time is to ask your student to stop when they do not know the definition of a word, and then you can talk about the definition. This is really helpful in building their vocabulary. And since a lot of students with dyslexia struggle with reading, and reading can feel kind of exhausting and difficult for them before they've made progress to get up to the level they're supposed to be at, they they often they often struggle with vocabulary just because they haven't been doing as much reading as their peers due to those reading difficulties. So you might notice that they don't really know what certain words say. And if you encourage them, when they don't know a word, they can stop and you can talk about the meaning of it, and then you can go on. And that way you're making the reading aloud time a really great exercise for vocabulary skills as well. Another great thing is you can work on comprehension when you're doing this, even if you're not doing a regular comprehension passage, even if you're just doing a regular novel, for example, or a nonfiction book. You can ask them to describe what they have read, and you can stop during reading to do this, or you can do it at the end. And I usually say a good rule for this is make the section smaller based on how much difficulty the student is having with reading comprehension. For example, if your child is really struggling a lot with reading comprehension, it can be overwhelming if we read an entire passage or a whole page and then go back and say, hey, what was that page about? So instead of that, try asking them about very small sections as you're reading. If they're really struggling, it can be a couple of sentences. You can have them read the sentence and a couple of sentences and ask, hey, what did those sentences say? Can you try putting it in your own words? Or if they're a little more advanced, you can do a paragraph, stop at the end of a paragraph, ask them about it, go on to the next paragraph. That's a really, really good way to help them improve reading comprehension and to make it much more accessible as well, because they won't feel so overwhelmed as if maybe we go through several pages or read an entire story and then say, hey, describe what that was about to me. If a student is more advanced, of course, you can go through maybe an entire page and ask them, or go through several pages and then ask them about what they have read and ask them to put it in their own words when they're describing it. It's really great to have your student read every day if possible. And of course, summers are really, really busy, so this might not be possible all the time. But if you're able to, this helps to make reading an expected activity, and they will probably enjoy it more that way. So if you're able to get it pretty consistently, or even if not every day, several times a week, it's going to make it much more of a normal activity that they are used to and something that they're expecting and probably more enthusiastic about it because of that. One of the great things is that reading and reading practice can come at any time. You don't have to be at home necessarily to do it. You can try keeping small books with you to read with your child when there is an opportunity. You may be able to read while traveling or waiting for a doctor's appointment, or if you are in line waiting for an event, you can do some reading with them then. There are lots of different opportunities, and if you have little books on hand, that can make it much easier to do that. And of course, these days we also have lots of e-readers like Kindles or tablets and different things that we can read off of as well, even if you're not carrying physical books with you. I thought we would talk about some ways to motivate kids to read in the summer. One really great thing is to enroll them in a library summer reading challenge. And a lot of these have been around a long time, so you might have done these when you were a student as well. But libraries often have challenges where students can earn rewards or earn prizes by reading books during the summer. Sometimes it's like a pizza party at the end of the summer, or they might like earn different perks or like win books, things like that. And lots and lots of libraries have these programs. So if you check out your local library and talk to a librarian, they'll be able to let you know what they offer as far as those programs go. Another great thing is to select books that cater to the interests of your student. And if you're unsure about that, one way you can find books of interest is to go to a library or to a bookstore and see what catches their interest. If you allow them to browse a little bit and see what they gravitate towards, you might find that they are seeking out books of subjects they are really interested in. And if they're interested in the book that they're reading, they might be much more interested in doing reading during the week. I wanted to mention that any type of reading counts. These can be books, comics, graphic novels, magazines. These are all different types of reading, so you don't need to be picky in that sense. If your student is really into graphic novels, that's a good quality reading item to use, or if they like magazines or comics, that all counts as reading. And so you don't need to be strict in the sense that you have to have them reading only novels or something like that. You can also ask your child's teacher or the school office about free reading sources such as Epic and others. Sometimes school districts have access to ebooks or different resources for books or audiobooks, and school districts may be able to offer something like that. And I just mentioned audiobooks. Audiobooks are really great for students with dyslexia. They can help students with dyslexia stay interested in books as they work to improve their own reading and help them to stay excited about books. And the audiobooks can also help them build vocabulary. Many libraries have audiobooks available. They often have physical audiobooks in the form of CDs that you can check out. They also lots of times have electronic devices like MP3 players with books preloaded that you can check out from the library and then return when you're done. And lots of libraries these days have websites where they loan out audiobooks. So that might be an option as well. You can get those audiobooks and put them on a tablet or phone, and that's another opportunity for getting audiobooks. And of course, there are lots of apps available as well, like Audible. Public libraries are a great resource for books and audiobooks, as I was mentioning. School libraries may also be open in the summer. Some school libraries do stay open. So if you're interested, you can check with your local school where your child goes and see if that is going to be the case for them in the summer. And letting your student wander and pick out books is a great way to keep them motivated and interested in books and keep them reading. Another great way to help your students stay interested in books during the summer is to read aloud to them. I think almost everybody likes to be read aloud to. I know I like to listen to lots and lots of audiobooks, and it's just a really fun way to listen to a book and to hear a book. And this is a great way to spend some family time in the summer and to help your student stay excited about books. And maybe you have favorite books that you had when you were a kid that you would like to read with them, or maybe they have something they're interested in, but it's a little bit above their reading level currently. And those are all good options for doing a reading aloud time. And when reading is part of your regular routine in any form, your child or student will probably be more likely to seek books out. Also, modeling reading is really great. If your child sees you reading, they may be more excited to read too. Something called extended learning is sometimes an option for students who receive services through an IEP. So, if your student does have an IEP, you can discuss this with the IEP team, and they may be able to receive services through the summer based on IEP goals. Another great way to help a student make progress in the summer is dyslexia tutoring. The right type of instruction during the summer can help them avoid the summer slump and even improve their reading and spelling over the summer so that they return to school reading and spelling better than when they left school at the end of the school year. If you are looking for dyslexia tutoring, we highly recommend the Orton-Gillingham method or one of the methods in the Orton-Gillingham family. There's some other methods in that family, such as Wilson Reading System is one of them. Barton is another one. And these methods are highly effective and have been around for a very long time. And if you find a tutor who is trained well in those methods and obviously knows how to use one of them, the student's going to make really good progress with those. So if you are looking for tutoring, we recommend looking for a tutor trained in one of those methods. And Dyslexia Connect provides online Orton Gillingham tutoring if you are interested. So what is Orton Gillingham? I thought I would talk about that for a moment because people often have questions about that. Orton Gillingham is a proven and highly respected method for helping children with dyslexia learn to read and spell. Orton Gillingham and the methods in the Orton Gillingham family provide an explicit, structured approach to reading and spelling. They really focus on the fundamentals. And as I was mentioning before, it's very much a building block process that is used in Orton Gillingham. And Orton Gillingham and the methods in the OG family focus on certain things during sessions. One of these things is phonemic awareness. And that means that students learn not only basic letter sounds, but also more complex letter combinations and learn to identify them in isolation and in the context of words. To work on them in isolation, the teacher often uses phonics flashcards. These methods also work on syllable rules. Students learn to identify and reproduce the major syllable types of English, such as the closed syllable, silent E syllable, open syllable, vowel combination, and others. These methods also teach decoding skills. Students learn to apply phonics and syllable rule knowledge while reading words. And I wanted to mention that nonsense words are tremendously useful for honing decoding skills. So one of the things that we notice is that a lot of kids with dyslexia are really smart, and even if they haven't received the right type of instruction yet, they often develop coping mechanisms for the struggles that they're having in reading. And one of these, as I mentioned, is guessing at words. One of the reasons we like to use nonsense words is that they can't really be guessed at just by the shape or how they look because the student has never seen them before, typically, and they provide really good practice decoding, using those decoding skills. And we use lots of nonsense words with the kids in our program and the adults in our program as well. And these methods also emphasize encoding or spelling. So that involves applying phonics and syllable rule knowledge in order to spell words. And then they also focus on reading fluency. Students read out loud and are monitored by their teacher or tutor while reading level appropriate materials. Reading accuracy is often a struggle for students with dyslexia, especially when they have developed bad reading habits. And students will start to break these bad habits and develop good reading habits, focusing on applying their knowledge of phonics and syllable rules. Well, I thought I'd provide you some more general information about dyslexia if you're interested in it. We have a bunch of information about dyslexia on our website, and Natalie's going to put our address in the chat again, dyslexiaconnect.com. This is just a picture of our homepage. If you go here and you notice the menu bar item that says Guide to Dyslexia, if you click on that, you'll find a lot of good information about dyslexia. And we also have a pretty extensive blog about dyslexia with lots and lots of different posts talking about different things related to dyslexia. We also have a Dyslexia Connect YouTube channel, and this is a channel with lots of videos on it about dyslexia and topics related to dyslexia. We have videos about accommodations for dyslexia at school, signs and symptoms of dyslexia in spelling and in reading, how dyslexia is tested for, and much, much more actually. And Natalie is going to put the link in that chat in case you're interested. Okay, well, it's time for a raffle tonight. As we mentioned the advertising for the webinar tonight, we're going to be giving away a $50 Amazon gift card. And Natalie is going to take the names of our attendees and use a randomizer, and she's going to choose one name of the attendees to receive that gift card. And the way this is going to work is that she's going to pick a name and put it in the chat. And we like to ask that the winner respond in the chat box within 2 minutes to confirm that they're present and listening to the webinar. If we don't receive confirmation within 2 minutes after Natalie posts that name, she's going to pick another name, and we'll just keep doing that until we have somebody confirm that they are here. And then that's when that's done, we're going to take note of that name and email address, and then we're going to send the gift card out this week so that you receive it via email. So Natalie will go ahead and start that process right now. And I just wanted to mention, we're so appreciative of you attending tonight. Thanks for taking time out of your schedule to be with us here tonight. We really like the opportunity to talk about dyslexia and help raise dyslexia awareness. And it's just a really fun event to be able to host these webinars. As I mentioned, if you're interested in dyslexia information or our online dyslexia tutoring, you can visit us at dyslexiaconnect.com. We do offer a free trial with no obligation of our online tutoring that you can sign up for there. We also are really active on social media. We post dyslexia information on Instagram and Facebook probably 4 or 5 days a week, and lots of good, helpful infographics and quotes about dyslexia. And a lot of people really like that information. So we'd love to have you follow us on there if you're interested. And that's also a great way to learn about upcoming webinars that we're going to be having because we announce them on there. And I wanted to mention that our next webinar is going to be in September. That's going to be a dyslexia simulation webinar. And we're going to be sending out information about that sometime during the summer and posting about that on Facebook and Instagram. So check that out if you'd be interested in attending that. And also mentioned we have our YouTube Dyslexia Connect channel that has lots of different videos on there with info about dyslexia. Okay. Well, I think we have some time now for questions and comments. So, Natalie, are we seeing any questions that we can go ahead and answer out loud here?
Yes, I see one right here. Julie says, special ed teacher in high school. Do you have any tools or accommodations for high school students?
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, one, as far as tools and accommodations, um, One thing I like to mention is that audiobooks and audio versions of books are always a great option for students with dyslexia, regardless of their age. That can help a student with dyslexia keep up with novels if they're reading novels for a certain class. There are also a lot of options to get audio versions of textbooks these days, which is really nice too, and that can be very helpful if they're being required to read textbooks. Some other tools and accommodations. There are some really good accommodations that are really helpful in general for students with dyslexia, regardless of what age they are. So, one thing is to have detailed or clear instructions given to them for homework. Homework can be pretty challenging for students with dyslexia. And if they have specific directions telling them how to complete the homework or what they're supposed to do, that will help them a lot and probably help them feel more confident getting started with their homework. One thing we've noticed is a lot of students with dyslexia will avoid doing homework at night and kind of procrastinate over it just because they feel really overwhelmed and aren't sure where to start. So that's a really good thing. And those directions are very valuable because kids with dyslexia sometimes have a hard time taking notes as well. So they might have trouble keeping up and writing all the directions that they're supposed to have while they're in class. So those directions will be really helpful if you have a handout you can give to them and send home. Also, additional time is also really helpful. If you can give them additional time to do any tasks that they're doing in the classroom, that's very helpful. And also additional time on testing. This this is great in many ways because number one, it helps them to relax much more when they're going into tests. And they can really use that time because it often takes them longer than their peers to read the material in the test. And sometimes to feel confident with it, they might need to read the material twice to really feel like they know what they're supposed to do and be able to answer questions. So that's another accommodation that's really helpful. So can you think of any others, Natalie? Any general accommodations that we talk about that would be helpful for that age group?
Yes, I was thinking all of the ones that you mentioned, and also access to text to speech. That's another great
Yeah.
accommodation. Sometimes you can even ask for your student to give verbal responses instead of having to, lengthy written ones.
Yep.
So that could really help reduce the impact and frustration.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. That can be really beneficial and they can use text to speech options. Those are built into a lot of software and a lot of apps these days in Windows and in Google. That's really useful so things can be read to them. And also they can use text to speech if they need to write something, if that's allowed, so that they can basically write by speaking into their computer or to their tablet and that can be helpful if they have a difficult time writing and a hard time getting started with writing assignments. So, yeah, it's another very useful one. Yeah, very good question. Do we have other questions here?
We have another one. How early can a student be evaluated and diagnosed with dyslexia?
That's a great question. So as far as the age, and there is often a distinction between a student being evaluated and actually receiving a diagnosis of dyslexia. Often, if a student is evaluated in a school, they aren't going to be diagnosed specifically with dyslexia in the school. They're probably going to be, if they do have dyslexia, they might be diagnosed with a specific learning disability, and they can possibly get accommodations in an IEP or a 504 for that based on that. So in school, as far as age evaluation goes, Natalie, what age would you say is that something that's probably not done before age 7 or 8? Is that when it's usually starting to be considered?
Taught first grade, and I had a couple students diagnosed in first grade, but it seemed
Oh
to
yeah,
mostly get diagnosed in late second, third grade.
sure. Yep. Yeah, and it may depend on the school you're in or the school district, and you can talk to school administrators about that. Parents always have the right under the Americans with Disabilities Act to request an evaluation. And so you can request that. You always have the right to do that at your school. And so if you're interested in that, you can talk to the school about that and see maybe if there's a certain system for doing that or a certain age at which they do that. If you're looking for a specific diagnosis of dyslexia, a diagnosis typically has to be given by a psychologist or doctor who works with learning issues. And typically that's going to be outside the school system. As far as ages for that, I think the youngest I've heard of those being done is probably 6 or 7 years old. They may do it when a student's 5 as well, but I don't think it's very typical. So it often happens probably when the student is 6 years old or older. And an evaluation like that is a formal dyslexia evaluation. And it's a pretty big process, sometimes lasts 3, 4, 5 hours during a day. And that is the process that can actually give a student an actual diagnosis of dyslexia. And question about whether you need a diagnosis is an interesting one because a student doesn't need a diagnosis of dyslexia to get the right kind of help that's going to help them improve their reading and spelling. So it's not necessary for that because a student, they might be able to get the right type of instruction even though they don't have a diagnosis, just because their parents have realized they have dyslexia or teachers have noticed that they show the signs of dyslexia. You also don't need a diagnosis of dyslexia to enroll your child in dyslexia tutoring. A diagnosis sometimes is necessary in certain school districts to get an IEP or a 504 for a student. So if there's a situation in which a student is obviously struggling, but there may be they might not be struggling enough to qualify for special services based on their performance. You might need a diagnosis of dyslexia if that student does have dyslexia to be able to get specific services for them. So diagnosis is sometimes pursued if a parent is trying to get services at school, or sometimes simply because they want the knowledge. They really want to be able to know for sure, through the word of a doctor or psychologist trained in that for sure whether their student has dyslexia or not. But with the students in our program, a lot of the students in our program do not have a dyslexia diagnosis, but they came to us because their parents learned a lot about the symptoms of dyslexia and realized that their kids have that. Yeah, that's a great question. Let's see. I was just looking through here and seeing if we have any other questions that we want to go over.
We have one. What are the benefits of audiobooks with dyslexia since they are not actually reading?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, and that's a good point that they're not getting the actual practice with looking at words and decoding words when they're doing an audiobook. So, the benefits of an audiobook are typically that audiobooks will help kids with dyslexia stay interested in books, even if they are currently struggling with their own reading. For example, the way it does that is that maybe their class is reading a certain book in class, but the student's reading is still struggling and is at a speed currently where there's not really a way that they're going to be able to keep up with the classroom reading when they're just using the regular book. But if they listen to the audiobook, they are able to keep up with the reading and do all the discussions in class that come up. And it can help them stay more excited about books that way. And um, something we've noticed is that if they really remain interested in reading and excited about the idea of reading, they often make much more progress once they start getting the right type of instruction they need. It can be really difficult if a student reaches a point where they just are frustrated and they avoid reading and they're kind of checked out from it. It can take a lot to try to pull a student back from that and get them making progress again. So audiobooks help them to do that. And Also, as mentioned before, it can help them with vocabulary as well because they're listening to lots of different words and things that are said. Do you have anything to add to that, Natalie, about audiobooks? Anything you've noticed?
Yes, I was going to say the vocabulary, having access to age appropriate vocabulary and content. I was also thinking that it might be a little bit above their current reading level, but
Yeah.
they're still listening to reading. It will support their comprehension, help build
Yep.
background knowledge, and just help develop a love of stories.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a really great point because often, with an audiobook, they can listen to something that maybe is a little bit above their reading level or might be much above their reading level, but is really, really interesting for them. And it's something that they've maybe discovered. They're like, "Oh, this seems really cool. I would really like to read this book," but they're not able to do it themselves currently. But they can listen to the audiobook, and eventually, as their reading improves, they'll be able to read the actual hard copies of those books as well. But it really helps them to stay interested. Let's see. Um, okay. Oh, and Elizabeth, she said she's a high school sped teacher. Are there specific teaching strategies you recommend? Yeah. So, um, some things like we mentioned in the presentation tonight, working with students who have dyslexia, lots of repetition is helpful, no matter what kind of topic you're teaching. Teaching concepts in different ways. So, just to give the example of if you're doing reading instruction with a student, there are a lot of different ways that you can work on the same thing, and that really provides a lot of variety. So to give an example, we often use flashcards, phonics flashcards during sessions. You can do that. You can also take those same sounds you're working out with the flashcards, spell words with them. You can also play games with those sounds so that the student is like having fun manipulating those sounds, and that can be really, really helpful. As far as at the high school level, I think a lot of those things apply, and some of the things we mentioned about tools and accommodations would be really helpful as well. Speech to text is really good for helping them to do writing assignments. Text to speech so that they can listen to material is very, very helpful. And then also having very, very clear directions about assignments and also examples of completed assignments. Those are really, really great because we've heard a lot from parents over the years about homework battles that they have with their students at night, where their student gets an assignment and comes home and they're really exhausted from the school day and having a hard time. And then it's time for them to do a homework assignment. And it might be reading a large amount of text or writing a paper. And just getting started can be really challenging for them. And that often results in them trying to delay and maybe distract their parents. And it can result in arguments about doing homework because they're just tired out. But if they have really good examples to look at and good directions, that makes that barrier to getting started much less, which is helpful. Let's see. Sarah asked, "Hi there, learning strategist, primary ages here. Do you have any strategies for students with dyslexia and ADHD?" That's a really great question. And one of the interesting things we talk about a lot is that some of the presentations of both of those, dyslexia and ADHD, might be similar in some cases. So, for example, when we're in a classroom, if we notice a student who is very distracted every time they are required to read, that could be ADHD, but it could also be dyslexia because that student is really frustrated and afraid of failing every time they have to do reading, and they're trying to avoid it because they feel like if they do try to read, they're going to fail at it. So that's an interesting thing with how there's overlap sometimes between those two things. As far as strategies go, I would say that the strategies that we use with students who just have dyslexia are very, very good for students who have both as well. A great thing to do is to mix up the instructional material that you're using, as I was just talking about a moment ago. Just keeping things interesting by using different approaches to teaching something, different exercises to work on things. There are lots of great ways that you can develop games these days that are pretty easy to do. Different websites you can do that on where you can say, hey, we're going to work with consonant blends today. Let me enter all these consonant blends and then develop a game with it. And we've noticed that with our students who have both dyslexia and ADHD, that's really, really helpful. Having a variety of materials to use that helps them to keep engaged. They really love games, of course, so we have a lot of games that are really targeting specific things that we know that they need to work on. Uh, Something else I would mention is that students with ADHD and dyslexia often really enjoy knowing what the plan is for the session that you're teaching them. So if you can tell them at the beginning of the class or the beginning of the tutoring session, here's what we're going to be doing today. We're going to start by going over this, and then we're going to work on this, work on that. And that's something that they really like to know. And if you've ever had a situation where a student is asking like, "Hey, are we done yet? What's going on? Are we done now?" One of the best ways to actually help them with that and sort of put their mind at ease is to have a plan like that you share with them. And you can even make a visual representation sometimes showing exactly like what the plan is for the day. And that can be helpful for them. Would you have anything to add to that, Natalie?
Yes, I was thinking to keep directions short and
Yeah.
single step when possible because long explanations can get lost. So you
Yeah.
could even pair brief directions with a visual cue. Um, use multisensory
Yep.
approaches like OG. Keep sessions very interactive, frequent responding, movement, quick feedback. And I was also thinking, like you said, like checklists, visual schedules, all of that will keep them engaged and on track.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. Definitely. Let's see. Any other questions we want to go over here? Oh, I see one here about IEPs and 504s. So Mary was asking, what is the difference between an IEP and a 504? That's a great question. And we often hear those terms used and sometimes used interchangeably, just depending on what the situation is. One of the main differences is that a 504 is often put in place to remove barriers and help a student access general education. So it might provide accommodations to them and provide some assistance so that they can access the normal curriculum and use the normal curriculum. For an IEP or individualized education program, that sometimes goes a step further, and an IEP might provide specialized instruction for a student so that they're not using the regular curriculum that other students are using. They're using specialized curriculum that has been decided upon and curriculum that's specifically tailored to the student's unique needs. Another difference you might notice is that um, there can be accommodations in both, but um, another thing, what is the word I'm looking for? Oh, modifications. It's more likely that if a student has modifications, that's an IEP because that tends to modify things much more. And a modification would be a situation in which the curriculum is actually being changed for the student, or what the student needs to do is being changed. Whereas 504 will largely be accommodations so that they can access the normal curriculum and use the normal curriculum. Yeah, let's see. See if we have any other questions here. Okay. Oh yeah, somebody mentioned Learning Ally is a great resource for audiobooks. Yeah, that's a great resource for audiobooks. There's also a website called Bookshare, actually, that students can with dyslexia can apply to use. And I believe it still is free if the student has dyslexia. I believe they might need a diagnosis of dyslexia, but it's possible that something from a school can qualify for that as well, an evaluation at school. And that has a huge amount of books on there. It also has audiobooks available too. So that's a good thing. Okay. Let's see. Oh, and Mary also asked, are you familiar with the MTA approach and do you recommend it? That is what my student currently uses in his dyslexia reading lab at his school. I do know about MTA. I was not trained in it myself, but I do know that it is based on Orton Gillingham principles. And I would say, as far as the effectiveness of it, it very much depends on the qualifications of the person using it. So if they're very well versed in it and they're teaching for mastery using that method, and very committed to that approach of going as slow as the student needs to build those foundational skills, that's the really, really important thing. So I have heard of it, but I'm not trained in it myself. But I know that it is based on Orton Gillingham principles. Let's see.
Someone
Um,
said it seems that dyslexia is on a scale of mild, moderate, and severe. Is that true?
oh yeah, that's a great question, Amy. Yep. Is that true, or have I been working with students with reading disabilities too long? So, uh, in my experience, that is absolutely true. Dyslexia comes in a variety of degrees, and in fact, I was mentioning the Dyslexia Connect YouTube channel before. We have a video on there specifically talking about that, in fact. So that absolutely is true. And in all my years of experience working with students who have dyslexia, I have noticed a great, I guess, spectrum of that with students. We work with some students who have very mild dyslexia, and once they start getting the right type of instruction, they make progress fairly quickly. We've also worked with a lot of students who have very severe dyslexia, and that sometimes manifests with a student maybe being much older, but still having a lot of trouble with basic words like CVC words or even three letter CVC words. So there is very, very big spectrum for dyslexia and a big difference, from one student to the next. They often with students who have dyslexia, there are certain signs and symptoms that are very, very common that we tend to see with almost every student who has dyslexia. But then there are others that one student may have and another student does not have, and the degree can vary a lot between students. So in my experience, that's absolutely true. Yeah, well, I think we're wrapping up here because it's about time to end the webinar. I just wanted to thank everybody again for attending tonight. We really appreciate you being here tonight. Thank you so much, Natalie, for being here and helping to answer questions. I really appreciate that. And thank you so much for attending. And we would love to see you at a future webinar if you feel like attending one of those. So hope you all have a great night. Thank you very much. Bye bye.